Klein, and thank you for condensing a life's journey into a very short time. I appreciate that. And we've got some emails and phone calls waiting, so let's get to them. This one comes from David, and he writes, Dear Father Klein, you keep referring to the sacramental character of the Lutheran Church. Yet the Lutheran Church has, in fact, only two sacraments, baptism and marriage. Is that? No.
Baptism and communion.
In communion, you're right. Just like any other Christian denomination. And I thought that Martin Luther himself only accepted two sacraments, baptism and communion. In this context, what do you mean by Lutheran sacramentalism?
Okay, well, first of all, the great emphasis on baptism and the Lord's Supper in Lutheranism can't be denied. There's really very central and a very high view of both of those sacraments. In addition, Luther actually wasn't that interested in numbering the sacraments, and neither were the Lutheran confessions. So confession sits almost as a third sacrament. And there are even,
isn't it true he went to confession to the end of his life?
Weeks,
right?
To the end of his life, yeah. And the confession was practiced widely in the Lutheran Church well into the 20th century, and some efforts have been made to revive it. In addition, there are allusions to a sacramental understanding of both marriage and ordination. They're minor, but they are there. I think more to the point, within the Lutheran tradition, at its best, God does indeed come to us through material means. And so that aspect of sacramentality is very much there. What isn't there in the way it is in the Catholic Church, obviously, is the range of the 7 sacraments clearly identified and celebrated. And I think there was less of a view of what Catholics call sacramentals. You know, all of those small material things through which God's blessing, grace, and presence are known to us.
Was it a couple of the problems with Luther that have become a problem is, one, he wasn't very systematic, right? So, I mean, we would have all...
quote him on any side of any issue.
Right, and that caused the problem.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, what came out of Luther that became Lutheranism were those who were making an effort to try and systematize what he had said all over the place. One of my favorite books of Luther is his Table Talks, and he's everywhere on that. But I also wonder to what extent Luther's rejection of transubstantiation had to do with his own background that was kind of an anti-Thomas teaching that kind of set him off in the wrong direction because of his formation his training before he became a priest.
Luther felt that the philosophy of Aristotle had totally trumped Jesus Christ in the late medieval church. And apparently, as he was taught late scholastic theology, that's what he perceived. What he didn't perceive was that there might be some use in clear definitions of the sort that we see in the doctrine of transubstantiation. And I think the rejection of that probably in some ways weakened Lutheran sacramentality and made it more open to rather more subjective interpretations. So Luther's vivid sense of the real presence, including the real presence after the celebration of the sacrament, so that the elements were consumed or carefully sequestered, that faded. And I think it faded in part because without a clear definition of what the presence is, the notion of an enduring and abiding presence faded.
I mean, I envision Luther in this tension between fighting against his understanding of Aquinas and transubstantiation, fighting against that, but yet at the same time defending the real presence against Zwingli and the others, and he's caught in between. Again, but not being a systematic theologian, not really leaving an answer.
That's right. And in many ways, Luther was his own magisterium while he lived. Once he was gone, holding the Lutheran movement together, and holding together even some of the genius of his own insights, to say nothing of holding together his continuity with the Catholic Church, became much more difficult, and finally, I think in the end, it was an impossible undertaking.
All right, take our first caller, Steve.